Welcome to this podcast. Here we discuss introspection, being, development, and all the good stuff. Concepts I want to elaborate on. One is dynamics and one is femininity. And coinciding with that is masculinity. And I think that we get a greater insight into relationships and when we say relationships it's the meta relationship. It's how we interact with the world and how we interact with ourselves and how we take in information and how we give out information and so on. So it's extremely broad, but getting these general ideas and applying them to the specifics of a scenario is paramount for getting to the bottom of things and ultimately enacting a better dynamic and enacting a better masculine-feminine relationship. And I don't mean strictly the male and female. I mean in the general concepts of them. And we're going to elaborate to get into the bottom of these things, or at least dig deeper into this realm to walk away with something that would be beneficial. Okay, so I'm going to start with the meta statement, or the big statement that I'm going to elaborate on, and that is dynamics equals femininity. So let's understand the word dynamics. So dynamic means, in truth, a relationship, but because relationship is an overused word, and the connotation of it is not understood well or received well because it's such a broad word, dynamics helps fix that word. So a relationship is the relating material to oneself. One is in a relationship, like the ship part is the kingship, meaning the selfhood. One becomes one with whatever they're relating. So they become the relationship. So relationship is really an outside experience that is internalized. And that's why the word dynamic answers or gives a depth to the word relationship, because it tells me that there's a reciprocating nature to myself and the object or the person or the thing that I'm in relationship to. Okay, so on the other side we have femininity, or I like to call it, or at least for this conversation, layers of experience. What that means is that whatever we're receiving, whatever experience we're enacting with, whatever all of life is dealt in many layers. Okay, so for example, a home, right? A home is a concept, an experience, an idea, a feeling, right? There's many layers to that experience. We could understand somebody writing an academic thesis on what a home is to personhood, and we could also understand the more melody aspect to home, like home, going home, the place of center. And there's many layers of experience when one approaches the concept or the reality of a home. Okay, so that being said, we understand that everything in life has these layers of experience. So what we're calling femininity is really the depth to something, or let's say for the home, right? One person might say, yeah, I have a home. Okay, let's move on with the conversation. While another, their whole essence is understood through the home. Okay, so the one who understands the home better is approaching femininity. Now, it's in anything in life. Okay, so it's understanding the difference between taking a car versus taking a bus versus the public transportation versus the private transportation, right? And then the femininity would say, okay, let's understand these experiences. What does it mean, the communal? What does it mean, the private, to control, as opposed to be a part of the bigger system or whatever. That would be the feminine layers, or the layers of experience. We're calling them feminine, but they're layers of experience. Now, one might just say, okay, I have a car, I take public transportation, so what? And that's just the surface level. Okay, so that being said, when I say a statement like this, dynamics or relationships equals femininity or layers of experience. Okay, so when you're in relationship to something, when you become one with that thing, really there is always more layers of experience in that versus anything else, right? I'm looking at this camera, right? And that doesn't have a lot of layers of experience, while I'm sitting in a room that has tons of layers of experience, because I'm in a deeper relationship to the room than I am to the camera. So the different layers of experience are based on the relationship. Okay, let's see if this works the other way around. Okay, so layers of experience or femininity equals dynamics and relationships. Meaning, I like the example of the Russia-Ukraine war, because it's a great example of something out there that the West decided to approach with strong femininity, meaning they wanted to understand the layers of experience, or the layers of understanding towards that event. Okay, so because that happened, does that mean that now they are in relationship to that war? Okay, so we can understand that that is true, because we see that as there's a deeper layer of experience on Earth, there's a deeper relationship that coincides with that. And so it's very intimate now, and it's contentious, right? Contentious means there's a relationship to it. Okay, so that's on that side. Now, another way of looking at it, so those are two ways of looking at it. One is dynamics equals femininity. The second is that relationships equal layers of experience. And the third is that something that attracts oneself, or I would say more something that affects a person, affection, but not the way that it's used in that term, but something that affects, right? Affection equals deeper parts of oneself, or more parts of oneself. Okay, so if something affects you, it means that there's more of you that's in interaction with that thing. So COVID-19 affected most people in a deep, impactful way, meaning that more components of selfhood were in conversation or in relation to that thing. And we could do this COVID-19 with the other versions, meaning COVID-19 had many layers of experience, so therefore we were in deep relationship to it, or we were in deep relationship to COVID-19, and therefore it had many layers of experience. And on the highest level, there's a dynamic between us and COVID, and therefore there are many, and therefore there's a femininity aspect to COVID, because it's not to COVID, it's to the dynamic, or to COVID, whatever, but in relation to us. Okay, so that's the first point. Now, one might ask like this, okay, so why can I not have a dynamic? Why can't I have a dynamic without having the femininity? Why can't I have the relationship without having those extra layers of experience? Okay, so let's take the therapy culture, because I think it's a great example of femininity in that way, where one understands many layers of their experience throughout their life and to adulthood. Okay, so they understand their many layers of their childhood and their teenage, and so they've revisited, and they've incorporated, and they recognize the mother in them and the father. There's all these layers of experience. Now, that's also another version of femininity, because they're broadening their experience of life. Okay, so Therefore, one will be in a deeper relationship to thyself because of those layers of experience. And that holds true. We see that one who is deeply enmeshed in therapy culture will be one who is in deeper relationship to themselves. Now, it doesn't mean that they're good with that relationship. It doesn't mean that there's no problems with it. In fact, it could become more problematic. Like, we can imagine a marriage, the relationship is more problematic than two random strangers that we put together. But the dynamic is still there. There's a meta relationship that still stands. The relationship doesn't fall away. Just because it's a bad relationship doesn't mean that it's not a relationship, and that it affects, again, the word affect, it affects each person deeply. Okay, so by default, let's move to that. By default, anything that affects oneself is a dynamic, is a relationship. Okay, so COVID-19, right, because it demanded of us to explore deeper layers of experience. Now here, the $1 million question, why? Why do I have to go to those layers of experience? Why do I have to go to the femininity? Okay, so first of all, quickly, just as a side note, when an actual male seeks out a female, that question is never asked, because of course they have to look for the deeper experience. And if they objectify, as it's called, there's problems. It's not a proper dynamic. Okay, so but let's move that aside and really actually explore this. So COVID-19 affects us. Okay, so therefore we need to bring in the feminine, or the truth of the experience, in order to complete the dynamic. If not, then it's almost like COVID-19, let's say, is a person, and you're in interaction with the person, right? And they're doing a lot to you, even if it's negative, but they're doing a lot to you. It's still dynamic, and you're doing a lot to it. You're talking about it. They're talking about you, right? There's a back and forth. It affects you. You're affecting it. And then that evolves, right? And then there's a question of, what are you giving to the dynamic? We know what COVID-19 is offering. What are you giving? What are you bringing to the table besides being affected? And the answer is by recognizing the depth that I could experience from it, meaning that there's something that happens from the dynamic, quote unquote, the child of a relationship, right? If a relationship doesn't bring out a child or a manifestation of something good in the realistic world, then the dynamic is troubling. The same thing with feminine itself. If there's no feminine that's brought into the picture, if there's no layer of experience that evolved beyond the initial layer of experience, then the dynamic is problematic, because there's no production. And in some terms, it's called toxic masculinity, where it's just layer. This is what we do. I'm not questioning. I'm not exploring. I don't have to. And that's problematic. Now, let's go to the last layer of approaching this, which is, if something affects you, then it affects more parts of yourself. Okay, so for the example of COVID-19 affected me. So therefore, more parts of me are in relationship to that thing. Okay, so what if the alternative? What if I explored more parts of myself in relationship to something random, like, let's say, the camera? I relate to more parts of myself in relationship to the camera based on the fact that, a camera sees, and different parts of myself see each other, and they're in relationship, and whatever. I come up with this relatable dynamic, right? Does it automatically mean that the camera affects me? And just by the fact that I just said this, I feel the camera more. Right away, there's a camera, who is that, right? It's affecting me more. So just my experience at the moment just proves it. But one could try it themselves, where they don't even have to start a dynamic. the fact that they explore understandings and layers of experience brings out the fact that it affects oneself. They're in dynamic with oneself. They're in relationship to oneself. All the words for all the different layers of understanding. Now, let's take a scientist. Somebody who studies language, a linguist, sorry, and they understand many layers of experience based on the fact that they write scientific papers on language. I mean, they're studying historical frames. They're studying, different frames of growth, of childhood, of adulthood, of evolution. How does it evolve? Communication devices and whatever. I mean, the grammar. How does grammar evolve? Is grammar natural? Is it from? Okay, so they're really exploring that realm, and we could call that femininity. They're exploring the deeper layers of experience in language. Okay, so. And then you're in conversation with somebody who's deeply competent or deeply aware of the experience of language. And you're in conversation with them and you're just talking idle talk. And what happens? What results is that at some point you're going to make an error in language, or you're going to demonstrate a lack of understanding in language, and they're going to correct you on it. Instead of continuing the dynamic of you and them, what happens is that they're in another dynamic with language itself. And because of that dynamic, they are affected. They're affected deeply by it, and they're in deep relationship to it. So much so that it's as if there's another person in the room. It's you and them, and then there's the language model of a human being that has to be negotiated with as the conversation goes about. So we see that whatever the person studies, whatever people put their eyes and ears and nose and mouth in, whatever they put themselves in, that is the femininity of experience. That is femininity, and that brings out layers of experience, and therefore it forces in a dynamic. And I would say it's impossible for one to connect to different new layers of experience without being in relationship to the thing that they're understanding. Okay? Now, let's understand more why it would be problematic the other way. Okay, so let's move from that and approach it from the femininity place. Okay, let's ask the question: if one explores femininity but doesn't want to explore the dynamic. Okay, so they're exploring layers of experience. They're exploring parts of themselves, but they don't want to explore the relationship aspect of it. They don't want to explore what that has to do with them. What are they bound to, right? All the relationship aspects of the information. And let's bring out an example. Let's say the scientists. They approach their study, right? But then when that study comes about in the relationship aspect, meaning there's a possibility of relationship, they're ignoring it. For example, the linguists, right? When the opportunity comes to be in relationship to it, or in their downtime away from it, they ignore the dynamic. They're like, no, I'll take the layers of experience when I'm studying it, but I don't want it to affect myself. Meaning, I want to be distant from it. I don't want it to have this overarching sense of myself. Okay, so they're actively, because I think it's natural to become in relationship with something that you explore, they're actively disengaging from the dynamic aspect of it. For example, the COVID-19, right? You can imagine somebody that studied it well, studied the vaccine aspects, studied all the different conversations revolving around this experience, and they're deeply competent in it, and they've explored the femininity as is. And then when it comes to the relationship aspect to it, of being affected by it, they ignore that. Meaning, if all of a sudden there is a side conversation where somebody's talking about it, the ears don't perk up, because it's this abstract study and they're ignoring the relationship aspect to it. What would happen ultimately? Okay? I think what would happen is that they would become distant from their emotions, or they would become distant from reality. Meaning, because they're disengaging from the thing that they are engaging in, what results is that they lose touch with the realistic framework of life. Okay, so let's go to actual male and female. So in this case, it's the female. So if the female says, I'm going to understand my experience with this male, and then what results is that, and then they decide that they're going to break the dynamical aspect of it, meaning I'm not bound to them, I'm not in relationship. They're cutting the connection aspect of it, and so what will result is the femininity itself would lose its ground, meaning the female will lose her own femininity in that, because that depth of experience coincides with the relationship aspects. And so the more they ignore the relationship aspects, the less deep their experience is, the less feminine they are, and they embody more of a masculine character. That's fine. Yeah, it's a little bit different than the scientist. The scientist we used in the framework of a masculine male figure. So therefore, for him, he will not lose more of his femininity. He will lose more of his relationship to life. It's a little bit different in the experience of the male. But it's the same idea. It's the connection to vitality is cut off. Not just vitality, to the realistic aspects of life. Now, this is fine. But so let's conclude the two aspects. One is that if somebody chooses to be in a dynamic without exploring the depth of the layers of experience, things become very superficial. Okay, so it's problematic in their expression of life, or their appreciation of what they're in relationship to, and it's problematic for society as a whole. Okay, now the opposite is also true, but the ramifications are different. For one to explore their femininity without connecting to the dynamic of it, to what that is causing them and how it's affecting them, or what dynamic is coming out of this experience, what happens is that instead of it becoming superficial, because they're still in relationship to experience, the relationship to experience, or experience for them, becomes distant from realistic reality. So the ramifications of one who overexplores femininity without appreciating the relationship aspect is less to do with the world at large and more to do with selfhood in relationship to the world. While the one who overexplores masculinity or dynamics itself, meaning the interaction as opposed to the experience of the interaction, the people on the opposing side of that dynamic are hurt the most, because the world is hurt, meaning they're just engaging in so many different things in the world and not allowing the the forms of experience to manifest themselves and teach or engage in the finalization of that thing. Okay, so let's recap. The initial statement is like this: dynamics equals femininity, and really we're doing the vice versa. We're saying femininity equals dynamics as well. But we're also saying it in different layers of understanding. So relationships equals... Thanks for listening. And if you would like to see the video version of this, check out my channel on YouTube.